Hey there, Knicks fans. How you doing? It's your boy, Jon and the Macri, with you for another episode of the Knicks Film School Podcast. We are recording this on, let's get the time exact in case something happens afterwards and we don't talk about it. Sunday night at 5:09 p.m. right now. Coming at you on a Monday, as always, joined by the man who has somehow been talking about basketball when there is no basketball to talk about with me for the last 9 months. We have made it. I'm not sure if we're happy with where we've arrived for myriad reasons, but Jeremy Cohen, how are you, sir?
Tired. This week, as fun as this week has been, it has been a blast. It is also exhausting. As I'm sure a lot of you also feel, the idea of just having your eyes glued to your phone or your screen, waiting for the next Woj bomb, or I guess Shams Wow, whatever you want to call it, Haynes nuke, anything. It's just nuke, like it's fun, but it's just like it's very exhausting to have to continuously look and update. And but again, I mean, you live for this stuff, right? We're just fans, and we've been waiting for this type of build up for like 9 months, I guess. So
200 and it is so today I think marks 257 days since the league shut down. Yeah. It's been a while. I actually this is absurd. On Friday night, I got to the point of exhaustion where I could not keep my eyes open anymore, and I was waiting for, it felt like there was going to be another move or two. It was midnight. And so I put my head on the pillow with both hands clasped around either side of my phone with the hope that a vibration, or because I keep, all the big ones on notification, would wake me and I would know. That's how sick in the head I am, Jeremy. And I think I woke up at 3 a.m. and saw, I forget what, there was a late night move on Friday, but it's all cloudy at this point. I don't remember what it was. But, yeah, man, it's been tiring, but it's been, I don't know. There's some different adjectives I could use, but I have a little something I want to say, but before I do, I'll turn it over to you. And I guess is there a word or a couple words or a sentence or whatever, and feel obviously elaborate as much as you want, that describe how you have felt about everything so far?
The first word that comes to my mind is honestly incomplete. I'd say that I felt generally okay with the moves. I'd say maybe it feels like a bit of a B, but it's hard for me to, I just have trouble because everything needs to tie in together. And right now we're looking at a team that has over $20 million in cap space. And some people could say, like, all right, well, clearly that's just, you had 9 months to prepare for this, and this is what you're left with. And then there's also the possibility of there's just may not be things that have come together, but they're in the works. And there's a reason why the Knicks haven't gotten to that point. And we'll get into all of that, but it's just, there are a couple of the signings that I really like. There's a signing that I'm not a huge fan of, and everything in between. But it's hard to look at this roster knowing that it's not a completed work. Like a lot of, you could look at probably 20, I guess, all right, let's call it 28 rosters, right? Because We're still trying to decide, I guess 27 because of the Hawks and the Kings and Bogdanovich.
Yes.
But the Knicks are the only ones that have a glaring hole, both financially and in terms of at the point guard position. So it's just hard to rate it. But if I had to rate it, I'd say it's fine. It's average. I was thinking a lot of what we went through last week with the presentation. And as of right now, a lot of the goals that I had are still intact. There aren't these albatross contracts. You're looking at more assets coming in than you are sending out. You're looking at an infusion of youth and a focus on players. 8 of the 14 players on the team right now are 23 years or younger.
It's crazy.
So, it feels like there's just that one finishing move that needs to be done, but we're just not there yet. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Yeah, I think that's fair. In regards to it's incomplete right now, I could just tell you, from a little, I don't feel comfortable putting anything else, if anything particular, out there, because there's so much misinformation flying around. But there's definitely still stuff that they're attempting to do behind the scenes to upgrade. I think in particular I don't say point guard. They're trying to get more, such that Elfrid Payton is not the one running the show next year, or at least is not the starter. In any case, I just want to, I have to say this because I was actually originally going to come on here and say something a little bit different. But I can't, because that would be disingenuous. I am honestly kind of disappointed in us as a fan base. And here's why. If we are being honest, and I think, why shouldn't we not be honest, right? We have to look at the fact that no one wants to be here in New York playing for the Knicks right now. It is obvious. We could get into the reasons for that. I think the most obvious reason is there's a bad team here, and anyone that could have come here, whether it was Fred VanVleet or Gordon Hayward, it's like they would still be a bad team, even if that person came. And nobody wants to come play for the Knicks with the attention that they get if they're bad, because it sucks to play for the Knicks in New York. I don't care if there are no fans in the stands when they're bad. I think they're, and I think that can be tough to accept, but the alternative is you go out and you pay guys 33, 50, 75% more than they're worth. And we did that last summer. We went and got, it's absurd to say, we got Bobby Portis for we paid Bobby Portis 15 million American dollars. That happened, Jeremy, right? I didn't imagine that.
That happened.
That was a real thing that happened. Like Julius Randle, people want to talk about like the contract that Julius, it's not that bad of a contract. Fair. Go look around at what other non-shooting, non-rim protecting bigs who are better defensively than Julius Randle got over the last 4 days. Go look at those contracts. And it's just like the people that are going to come here, if they're going to come here, they're going to come here on overpays. So like, I get you're upset, and I shouldn't even say you're upset. I get that you're less than pleased with Elfrid Payton as like the point guard here, and I get a lot of people are upset at that. I'm upset at it. You know why? Because I had to watch Elfrid Payton last year, and he wasn't particularly fun to watch. And when the team was on the floor with him, they were frustrating, and I totally hear that, and I totally get it. And I remember I didn't get amnesia, right? I remember that happened. But the sad fact is that he was the best point guard willing to come here and take our money to play this year. Unless could DJ Augustine have taken, goodness, I don't know. What do you want? 3 years, $30 million? Do you want to pay DJ Augustine 3 years, $30 million, Jeremy?
I do not.
Not so much, right? Shabazz Napier, that's what's getting your blood flow out there, Knicks fans. Shabazz Napier, go look at his on-off splits over the course of his career. For the minutes that he played, he has not necessarily been a guy who stayed on the court all that much. Anyway, I get all that, but it's not about Elfrid Payton necessarily. It's like they needed to go out and act responsibly. They needed to give the fan base, me personally, the belief that they were not going to be pressured into doing something ridiculously stupid. And through 5 days, after a lot of people for a lot of the last 9 months have been jumping up and down worrying, Leon Rose, why would Leon Rose come here if not to bring stars to this organization? They don't have a comprehensive plan. All of these development people, they're for show. It's all nonsense. It's all BS. They went out and they acquired Ed Davis for 2 future second round picks. And then they maneuvered on draft night. They traded for a future second. They're in it on JaVale McGee right at press time, who knows what happens with that. They haven't gone and traded for Russell Westbrook. They didn't pay Gordon Hayward 4 years and $120 million. They didn't do any of those things. They made moves around the margins. They did what I personally, as a fan, have been begging them to do for essentially the last 20 years. And they didn't, and I don't want to hear, I'm going to write about it for today's newsletter because it's coming at you on Monday. But like, you can't compare this to last offseason when they paid guys 2 and 3 times more than they were worth. And more importantly, when they went out and got guys who were completely the worst fits with the players that they had, who need the ball in their hands and need guys who are going to complement that. You don't bring in a Bobby Portis or a Marcus Morris or Julius Randle if you're trying to foster the development of a Kevin Knox and RJ Barrett. You don't do that. Is Elfrid Payton great? No, of course Elfrid Payton's not great. This isn't about Elfrid Payton being great. And I'm sorry for everybody who's like, well, why'd you have to bring in anyone? Run Frank and DSJ out there at the point guard position. Folks, there is no easier way. I'm almost done, I promise. There is no easier way to make the players on your roster absolutely despondent about what you are doing as an organization than putting them out with a point guard who can't play point guard. And look, I love Frank Ntilikina. I want to believe in Frank Ntilikina. I think Dennis Smith Jr. deserves some modicum of belief in him. These are still young players. They could grow. The notion that it would have been a responsible decision to go into next season with those 2 people at the point guard position and nothing else is lunacy. I'm sorry, it's lunacy. They needed to bring in someone who could run a competent offense. And I'm not going to sit here and quote statistics about how many points per 100 possessions the Knicks scored when Elfrid Payton was on the floor with Mitchell Robinson or when he was on the floor with Mitchell Robinson and Julius Randle. And yes, even when he was on the floor with Mitchell Robinson, Julius Randle, and RJ Barrett, you can look them up, folks. They're pretty damn good. I get it's ugly, and I get the spacing isn't ideal. Well, guess fucking what? Beggars can't be choosers. I'm sorry, but that's how I feel. And you know, and this is the last thing I'm gonna say. For fans who wonder why we hear the rumors about Russell Westbrook and John Wall and whoever else the fuck, this is why. This is why when you have people who have to run the organization and they look out and they see everybody and their mother being like, either A, why didn't the Knicks do anything? Or B, this is all the Knicks did. They just have to act like a normal goddamn organization for once in their lives. And I'm sorry if Elfrid Payton made you get in your feelings about their offseason. I really do apologize for that. But for fuck's sake, sack up and accept the fact that this is where this organization is at right now. Blame whoever you want. There's a lot of people to go around to blame. Some of them are still there. I hope they lose their jobs soon. Don't have to guess to think of who I'm talking about. But it's time to look in the mirror and realize where this thing is at. And where this thing is at is ground floor, basement. They need to operate like this to get back to a place where hopefully, fingers crossed, they can develop talent, turn these draft assets into something, turn this flexibility into something. Again, this was the easy part. That's the worst part. It's like people are complaining about this. This was the easy part. This was the bare minimum. Now comes the hard part. Can they do it? We'll see. I don't know. But the last 5 days have given me encouragement. That's it. I'm sorry. I don't think I've had maybe 5 rants like that in the history of the show. And I felt like one was needed here. So.
Yeah. You know, I generally agree with what you're saying. Yes, obviously this is a team that went 21-45 last year.
Something really shitty. That sounds about right.
It was not great. And this is a bad team. We knew that this was a bare bones roster that needs to be upgraded both through the draft and clearing away a little bit in terms of, you know, players on the roster. I think, though, and something to keep in mind, though, is that it's also because there are just better teams out there. It doesn't have to be that, oh, my God, the Knicks are so bad that they can't attract anyone. It could be that, hey, you know, DJ Augustine, he just got 3 years and $21 million to go to the Bucks. And that's a contending team. Right. Yeah. You know, so if you're making $7 million versus, as you said, if it was like 3 for 30, right? Or however much it would have to be to make sure that you're paying a premium to steal him away, not from the Magic, but now from the Bucks. That is a lot. And so for me, it was like, well, I wanted someone like a Killian Hayes to run the offense, but or at least be second. Obviously, I've talked about Mike Conley before.
Yeah,
but the idea,
get a rookie in there.
But the idea was, okay, if you can't trade for a guard, if you can't get a rookie in there, and if you can't get someone like Fred VanVleet, what is your fallback option? And for me, it felt like, okay, that would be DJ Augustine. That's a great pick. But after that, it felt like, who really is there? You know, I'm not sure who could be left from the scrap heap. And my big thing in terms of, I guess, if we, you know, I really do feel like we should go more in, you know, quintessential order. Or not quintessential, but I'm blanking on the word. You know what I'm saying? Let's start from the beginning, and maybe we can work our way over to the end. But I'll say just with Elfrid Payton, and I think we'll get back to him as well, because I would like to a little bit. And I'm
we can talk about him now. I think it's as good a time to talk about him as anyone.
Let's talk about him now. My thing with Elfrid Payton is this. You look at the scrap heap that's available, and I don't like the signing, but I wasn't really going to be thrilled with any of the options.
There were no good options.
I understand that people could say, well, you know, you've got Jeff Teague. Sure. Yeah. But here's the thing. Jeff Teague, he's 32 years old. He last year started and then was moved to the bench in Minnesota. And then he played backup for Shabazz Napier, who we'll talk about in a second. Yeah. And then he got traded to the Hawks and played backup to Trae Young. Now, I can understand playing backup to Trae Young. He's an all-star.
Yes.
Backup to Shabazz Napier, not great.
And can I just say one more thing about Jeff Teague?
Sure.
Everybody's assuming Jeff Teague wanted to come here because Tom Thibodeau's here.
That's what I was just about to say.
And and it's not just Jeff Teague. And I promise you, I am not saying this out of my ass. Assuming that any player in the league wants to come here. And this sucks to say. I hate the fact that I have to say this, but that is not a safe assumption. You cannot assume that about anyone. Sorry, yeah, I had to say that.
Again, there was the Indiana connection with Brad Stevens. They just lost Gordon Hayward. I think that plays a factor. I'm not saying what you're saying is incorrect. I'm just saying that it doesn't have to be just like, oh, well, the Knicks wanted to sign someone and he doesn't have to sign here. It could also be he wanted to sign somewhere else.
Yeah.
And for a guy like Jeff Teague, who has made his money before, again, he's 32 years old. He might say, well, if the backup job, for example, was the one offered to me in New York for $5 million, and if the backup job offered to me in Boston is the rookie minimum, which for him would be about 2.5 or so. Again, like I'm going to take 2.5 million less because I've already made my money to contend. And to get that contention, because I just played for a terrible Hawks team and a terrible Minnesota Timberwolves team, and then I made one appearance in the playoffs. So maybe I want something more than just to potentially be someone's backup in New York. And that's totally fine. But the Berman report felt very vague to me. It wasn't that I didn't want to believe it. It's just the way that he phrased it, it didn't necessarily come off as like one party turned down the other. It didn't feel certain, and it left me asking more questions than I started with.
That's fine.
And you know, that's just kind of the way it is. But then you move on to someone like Shabazz Napier, and he like, yes, obviously he makes someone like Elfrid Payton look far worse, and Elfrid Payton makes him look like a Steph Curry type. But we're talking about someone who has started 56 of a possible 345 games.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you want to talk about him being in a backup role, then sure. But to me, it just feels like we're talking about the devil you know versus the devil you don't. And because we've seen Elfrid Payton, it's like, okay, well, we know we don't like that guy. We really don't, and we want to go somewhere else. But there's something I was looking for, and I found it, and it was really fascinating to me, which is that, as we know, Elfrid Payton and Julius Randle have been on the same team together for the past 2 seasons. They were in New York this past year, and the year before that, they were in New Orleans. This past season, Elfrid Payton logged 1,246 minutes.
Okay. Of
those 1,246 minutes, a whopping 1,035 were flanked by Julius Randle. That's 83% of his time spent with Julius Randle. The season before that, he played 1,250 minutes. 802 were with Julius Randle. That's 64%. For context, RJ Barrett played 1,704 minutes.
Okay.
He played 606 minutes with Mitchell Robinson. That's 35.5%.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
So yes, it tells me 2 things. 1, the Knicks did not do a great job of playing RJ and Mitch. And 2, Elfrid Payton and Julius Randle are playing so much together to the point that it is so hard to separate the two. It's like trying to date one of 2 Siamese twins. You have to figure out.
I was waiting. I knew something was coming. I knew something was coming.
You can point to one's flaws and say, well, I can see what they're like with and without that person, but it still feels like there is somewhat of a tenuous grasp. And I get it. His offense is absolutely abysmal. And I'm not trying to sugarcoat it. It really is. But
can we talk about that? Finish what you're saying, because I want to get back to it.
I got the chance to get some stats from Synergy. And overall, I mean, Elfrid Payton on offense last year was poor. That's how he graded. He's graded out as a poor. He's poor in transition. He's a below average player in the half court. He's not a good pick and roll ball handler here. It's his below average, 27th percentile. He's eighth in transition, 8th percentile in transition. It's just not good, but there are some positives. He was excellent in the handoff division. He was very good in offensive rebounds, and his cuts were excellent. And then you look at his defense. His defense last year was actually rated as excellent. The problem is that, well, he was very below average off screens. He was not good in isolation. But as a pick and roll ball handler, he was good. They rate him as excellent in post ups. There's something to work with. It's not a matter of this is a good player and we should have him in a backup role. It's a matter of, and I can talk about, I have Teague's information here. I have Shabazz Napier's information here. I've got Payton from before this season. I can tell you it is not sparkling, but what I do know is, relatively speaking, it's closer than people think. It does not mean that I am content picking between any of them. I am really not.
And nobody should be.
Right. And the thing is, though, and you talked about this, and it's totally true. If you see a lineup that features 5 players and they're all 20 to say 22 or 23 years old, that is a flaming disaster. Yeah. You need someone who can be a floor general, who can direct you a little bit. And Elfrid Payton is actually capable of doing that. Not super well to the point where he belongs here, but well enough that it is an upgrade over the younger players that you have because of their inexperience, because Dennis Smith Jr. is a shell of himself, because Frank Ntilikina has just, I still believe in Frank, but I'm not entirely sure it is at the one. There's a lot of unproven here. Elfrid Payton is a proven commodity. He's proven that on offense he stinks. Absolutely. Do not get me wrong. But defensively, he does hold value. And offensively, if you can fit him around 3 shooters and a big who can operate in the pick and roll, then you're looking for some success. And if you're doing that off the bench, we were just talking about this in the Slack channel for the Strickland. Mm-hmm. If you pair Elfrid Payton with Nerlens Noel and you get 3 shooters like Bullock and Quickly, and if Knox comes around, then you're actually looking at a second unit that's not ass. It's actually okay. And it congeals a little bit more.
But that's our bar, right?
Yes, of course. But I also been thinking about this. Think about what Saturday represented, right? What would it have been like if Gordon Hayward opts into his contract, or Friday night at 6:05 p.m. it's a sign and trade to Indiana, or they figure out a way to get him to Charlotte? All of these opportunities. But then what happened is that we had our hopes that were very low to begin with, it felt like. And then suddenly Gordon Hayward became an option. And we're really excited about this. Obviously there are people who just didn't want that. They prefer to just be a mediocre team, get a great pick, the Cade Brigade, whatever it may be. That's fine. That's your prerogative. That's cool. But I think about Gordon Hayward and how him hitting the market changed perception on what is a reality and what is feasible and what is exciting. And then we were so hung up on this idea, and it felt like we're not, we're only waiting on him and all the good options are gone. And then he signs in Charlotte. And then it's like, okay, well, you're telling me we waited for Gordon Hayward to sign with the Hornets? And
well, it's the opportunity cost of waiting.
He signed a 4-year, $120 million deal, which Knicks fans, the vast majority, would not have wanted to touch.
Yeah, but what was the opportunity cost of that? What player got signed during that time?
Right.
Where
it
you
seemed
looked
like
at
a lot of the market was in a hold, and a lot of the other like unless you're a team like Detroit, very few teams had cap space. We talked about the fact that there were only 5 teams, and of those 5 teams, the Heat basically
there's only one left now.
Right. Well, of course, but the Heat brought the band back together. You had the Hornets keeping it open. You had the Hawks going after Gallinari, which, in my opinion, is an awful fit, especially because you've got Collins at the 4.
I don't know what they're gonna. There's something going on there.
It's a mess, but they're trying to add win pieces around Trey. I get that.
I don't. Sorry, I don't want this to become a let's defend Elfrid Payton podcast, and you're not doing that.
Exactly.
It's more we're not trying to do that.
Right. It's more just trying to lay out the cards here because you have one team. When Gordon Hayward was off the market, you had two teams that were really available. I mean, three. What? No, two. You had the Knicks and you had the Hawks.
Yeah.
And the Pistons already blew their wad, within the first 3 hours. So what you're basically trying to operate with here is, what are we going to do with the leftover money? And it didn't have to be like Gordon Hayward is plan A, because yes, you did have 10 months to plan for this. So if you didn't think, unless you knew for a matter of fact from the get-go that Gordon Hayward was going to opt out and you were going all in on a player like him, which it really doesn't sound like that was the plan, then you've got a lot of options here. And then after the feeling hits of Gordon Hayward signing with a team like Charlotte, then it's like, oh my God, we're stuck with Elfrid Payton and we didn't get Gordon Hayward. And so it's like a double whammy.
Yeah.
And again, I think it's all about the order of operations here, because I'm very much convinced that there is more going on.
Well, look, it may
because
not
of the fact
happen.
that there is just an absolute logjam. Again, in the front court, to me, you do not sign Nerlens Noel and with the expectation he's going to get playing time and keep $20 million of your cap space open and still have Julius Randle. I'm telling you, it feels like there's something in the works there. And I really think that if what the Knicks did instead was switch up, whatever, we'll find out what this trade's going to be. For all we know, this trade could happen if there is a trade.
With the Lakers?
We record this podcast while people are listening. The point being, if you did whatever trade that would be, or you do other actions, and then you sign Elfrid Payton to leftover cap space, then it's a different story. Then it's like, okay, well, we got the big person, whoever that is. And, if they don't get that, then we can start talking about how this is a problem, how the Knicks were left holding the bag. And this is not ideal, but you have to look at Alec Burks, who can generate value. You have to look at the fact that they're getting Ed Davis for 2 seconds. And mind you, I can't be the only one here who feels like it's a little fishy that we haven't heard any official news about Ed Davis being traded to the Knicks.
I actually didn't even pay attention to that.
To me,
yeah, no, that makes sense.
It is bizarre. And what it tells me is that there's a bigger deal going on in the works.
We're okay. Listen, we're going to get to your craziness in a second.
Sure.
We'll do that.
But again, I agree. It sucks to the point that it feels like we are, or at least I am, I don't want to speak for you, but defending Elfrid Payton when that's really not the case. It's just looking at the market that's available and the fact that the Knicks could have gone a number of different paths. And like I said last time, it always feels like navigating through landmines and hoping not to step on one. And to me right now, it feels like the Knicks have not stepped on any significant landmines. I know that Elfrid Payton at $5 million is frustrating.
But
I know that he has a no trade protection because he signed a 1-year deal after another 1-year deal. Okay.
Who cares?
I get
$5 million.
But what have the Knicks done that will really hamstring them? And yes, you could say, well, they could make a big deal and they could always get out of it. Of course they could. If you said Gordon Hayward at 3 years, I could have figured out a way to walk myself into that or talk myself into that. Mm-hmm. If you'd said 4 years, I would have been a lot more uncomfortable. And the only way I would have been comfortable with that type of deal is saying 2 years from now, I feel comfortable using his salary as filler. But
if it was a fair number,
if it's the right deal, if it's the right number, and if he's healthy, because we know that he has had some concerns with injury.
It would have been, again, to use the same words I used before, it would have been lunacy.
Right. But again,
entertain giving him that contract, or for that matter, giving 8 to 10 of the other contracts that got handed out.
Yeah.
It would have been sheer lunacy.
And I'll say this and then I'll flip it over to you. I do agree that the Knicks are at a lower point and they're building. I don't think they're quite that low to the point that it's, out of the question that they can sign good talent, but it's the sort of thing where you have to build up.
Well, they're not, because they did. The guy, like Alec Burks and Nerlens Noel, 1 year at the money they got, like that's a sign that, okay, there's some faith in something that's going on here. Right. I'm just talking generally to be like, we're the Knicks. If shitty player X walks through into his agent's door and is like, here are the teams that could potentially sign you, they're going to be like, ooh, you know what? Send me to that team. Like maybe there's a couple of guys like that because there is some stuff good going on here. But acting like we can just get anybody we want at this point, even if we pay more, it's not the case. It's just not.
Yeah, I mean, respect is not given, it's earned. And we tried something similar last year, which was let's just throw money at talent and we'll try to make it work, and we can try to flip those players. And the only one that really worked was Marcus Morris. And granted, it was great that it worked. Give credit because they did poach him after he agreed to go into the Spurs, but it also wasn't necessarily part of the plan, and things changed. It worked out for the Knicks' favor. And I'm sure that Marcus Morris is thrilled because if the Knicks don't sign him to $15 million, he doesn't get traded. And if he doesn't get traded to a team that's as rich as the Clippers, here's the thing. He was eligible to get, I think it was about 120% of his contract from last year. So he wouldn't be able to make the money that he's making right now with the Clippers if not for the fact that the Knicks gave him that $15 million to begin with.
This is where it really comes back to for me, because again, this is not about defending Elfrid Payton, who I actually think is a little bit better than you're giving him credit for. I think someone who could just run an offense and have the other guys on the floor at the same time as him feel like, okay. And I'll get to the RJ Randle dynamic of this because that's real. That's a very real thing. And if people are upset about that, I totally get that. But if you had said to me the day Leon Rose took over that I'd be sitting here 5 days into the offseason and I'd be saying the worst thing that they did was brought back Elfrid Payton at a discount, making nearly half of what he made last year. Worst thing that they did. I'd be like, where's the confetti? Where are the fucking streamers? Where are the party hats? Where do I go? I mean, do I have enough booze? Do I need to go? Do I need to get a keg? Do I have? I mean, are we like? Should I hire a bartender? Like that would have been my attitude, especially if you told me all of the like. Here's one. What if the Knicks didn't trade Marcus Morris for a first-round pick, which happened after Leon Rose got here, and B, signed him to the contract that the Clippers just signed him to, except, oh, wait, they would have needed to give him more because they're a shitty team and he wouldn't have re-signed for that number. It would have been probably 4 for $80 million. Like, what if we were sitting here right now talking about Marcus Morris, New York Knicks, 4 years, $84 million? How about them apples? I mean, like, so... with all due respect to the conversations about Elfrid Payton or Shabazz Napier or whoever the hell you want to say, and like, I can't do it, especially when two things, getting into the weeds of this. One, Elfrid Payton, putting aside the fact that he actually succeeded when he had Mitch on the floor with him, even when he didn't have any other shooters, like it was like one shooter, sometimes no shooters. Like put that aside for a sec. They got a 4. They just drafted a 4 who's going to be able to stretch the floor. Theoretically, RJ Barrett is now better from 3. And I don't know who they're going to start at the 3, whether it's Burks, someone who's not here yet, Knox. Like that person should also probably be able to give you a little bit of floor spacing as well. So the thing about like he can't shoot, the offense is doomed. RJ is going to be driving into, 4 people again. Like, cool your jets. That's probably not going to happen, especially since they have a real coach. That's first of all. Second of all, the RJ Randle thing. Again, that's real. Randle needs to go. Not because he's a bad player, not even because he'd necessarily be a bad fit on this team if used in the right role, but because it's just like you said, too stocked up at this point. You just drafted the most, arguably, the most NBA-ready player in the draft, and he plays Julius Randle's position. So, and I could say, again, I can't get into specifics, but I know for a fact that they're trying to move on from. Let me rephrase that. They have had discussions about moving on from Julius Randle over the last several days. That much I could 1,000% confirm. And I'm not breaking any news by saying that. We've heard from Ian Begley and we've heard from Mark Berman. Like all these people have reported that they would look to move on from Julius Randle. So like they're trying. It's not easy to move on from Julius Randle. Again, as I referenced, look at the contract numbers that guys who are of his similar archetype and arguably worse got. So we shouldn't judge it yet. And you know what? Worst case scenario, if this is the roster that they go into the training camp with, I guess my final question to people would be like, okay, well, what did you want them to do differently? I've heard some people say, well, if you knew you weren't going to be able to get a better point guard in free agency, you should have drafted one you should have drafted Malachi Flynn, or you should have, traded up for Killian Hayes or taken Kyra Lewis at 8 or whatever the hell. Look, if you're a franchise that's operating, like you have this opportunity, this lottery pick, these don't come around very often. You have a top 10 pick here.
Well, for us, they do actually.
Well, yes. And they've, and you know what? And the last time we had, well, RJ was like a no brainer. I'll put him aside. But before that, they drafted Kevin Knox. Why? Because they needed a scoring wing, right? They needed a scoring wing and they drafted Kevin Knox. When who else was sitting there? His teammate, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. But wait, hold on. They had just drafted Frank Ntilikina, right? Can't draft Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Frank Ntilikina here. Again, love Frank, but had that work out. You take the guy you want. You take the guy you believe in. They believed in Obi Toppin. If he sucks, I'll be the first one to be like, they're idiots, right? As of now, I think he deserves the benefit of the doubt. And as of now, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt to have the draft that they wanted to have and feel like, you know what? We're going to be all right. If it, like, I'm sure they had on their board, worst case scenario, Elfrid Payton, and had discussions about it. What if it's this? How much are we hurt if it's this? If this is the situation that we go into training camp with? And I'm comfortable with the fact that they have assessed that it's okay. And you know what? I don't think that's that ridiculous. All right. I think we've beaten Elfrid Payton to death, which I think is what people actually would like to do out in Knicks land. That's mean. But whatever. What else should we talk about here? Because there's other stuff. I mean, I don't know where to go next.
Sure. We quickly touch on Alec Burks, who I think
Burks.
He's a much more likely candidate to start. Definitely more so than Kevin Knox. If Kevin Knox is starting at the 3, then I think something's gone horribly wrong.
Well, but, or something has gone horribly right. Or not horribly right. You know what I'm saying? Sure. Something has gone right. No, if Kevin Knox, look, they're not going to start Kevin Knox at the 3 if just to put him out there. They're going to start him at the 3 if he deserves to start at the 3. I'm just that would actually be great, but probably going to be Alec Burks.
Right. No, I mean, it's encouraging in the sense that you've got someone who can hit corner threes, who can do a little bit with the ball in terms of handling. He's got some wiggle.
Great little offense. Yeah. But he's not a ball hog. Passes
he's
the
not.
ball.
No.
Yeah.
Friend of the show, Chip Murphy, he tweeted out that Burks is one of 64 players who attempted 100 pull-up threes last season. And of those 64, he ranked 6th in percentage at 39.4%. Yep. And he also attempted a career high in those threes, and percentage went up. So
corner threes, very good, which is something that Thibodeau mentioned is something important to him.
Yep.
I'm going to pull up his where he's in like the 80th or 85th percentile in the league in terms of assists for a wing. Mm-hmm. So again,
and he gets the free throw line quite a bit.
Yeah.
I think Terry, I guess in this case, posted about how he really gets to the line quite a bit, and that's great. So you need someone like that. Perfect. And also just the value. 1 for 6 is phenomenal value. If you look at what the Knicks have done right now, yes, obviously you've got Payton at $5 million. I mean, he's making 6 because of the dead cap of 1, but it's 5. If you look at the entire book that the Knicks have right now, it's Julius Randle at $18.9 million. You got RJ at a little bit over 8, and then everyone else is earning below $7 million, and there's short-term contracts, which means that if you wanted to move some of these pieces around, be it at the deadline, for something bigger, for picks, whatever it is.
Well, wait a minute, Jeremy.
Flexibility.
What if they want to take on, these guys don't make a lot. What if they want to take on a bigger salary? Oh, wait.
Wow.
Well, they got a lot of, I'm just saying the flexibility, like this cap room doesn't expire tomorrow or the next.
It doesn't. But again, I do not see the Knicks going into the season, not only not hitting the cap floor, but just barely hitting it, because again, Leon Rose is a former agent. He knows what it's like when a team, I think it was the Mavs, maybe it was the Bulls, where we've seen teams before hoarding cap space. So now you're basically saying to an agent, possibly even your former agency, which you used to run, and other agencies out there as well, hey, I know there's a pandemic going on. I know that your players can't get work in other countries because those leagues have also started and they might have restrictions against Americans coming to play. But you know what? I'm going to keep that salary cap open. I'm going to do it because in the event of, hitting it by getting on a salary dump, That's what we're gonna do. That sounds great to me. That is not.
So you think the move?
Strategy.
You think a move's coming soon?
I really do. Look, do you want me to get into what I call a Kornacki, or do we want to?
No, let's finish with the Kornacki. I just wanted to.
The Kornacki hasn't even started, my friend.
Okay. But the Kornacki will be the finale of the show. I just did want to bring up Nerlens Noel's name, because Nerlens Noel is a funny character that'll probably be looked back on in NBA history as a bit of like, wait a minute, this is a guy who turned down 5 years, $80 million. Is that really what happened? Yes, that's really what happened.
And mind you, that was before he signed with Clutch. It's kind of a misnomer that with Rich Paul he declined it. Not so. He was with another agency. Realized how big of a mistake it was to not re-sign with the Mavericks.
Then went to
Clutch.
So yeah, I've made that mistake before. In forgetting that. He's good if you play him in the right role. And the thing that I'm really happy about is I love me some Taj Gibson. Shout out Fort Green's finest. The Knicks offense. It's funny, more than their defense. Their offense fell off a cliff when Taj Gibson was in the game last year. And it was really bad. And that was because like Mitch offers a vertical threat that obviously Taj does not. And the fact that now if Mitch, I'm assuming he's going to start. If he picks up, 2 quick fouls and you have to bring in Noel, your game plan doesn't go to shit, which is great. And on defense, he's kind of like a Mitch light. He swat shots and the whole thing. So I think again, to get him on that deal, and even like, again, I'm not to go over Payton again, but like if you ask like an average, like NBA, media person, probably an NBA, GM, like Elfrid Payton, 1 year, $5 million. Is that a fair deal? They might not love Elfrid Payton, but even they look at that and be like, yeah, it's okay. That's fine. Guy come in, run the show. So they got 3 of these signings plus the Ed Davis thing. They signed Theo Pinson to a 2-way, which whatever. I mean,
it's more, I'm curious what they do with Miles Powell. Probably.
It's exhibit 10 right now.
Right. When the time comes, again, this isn't like, oh my God, what are they going to do? It's just like, I'm curious. There's not really a G League to our knowledge. It might be more of a bubble situation. So a lot of it's up in the air. I would just like to know, because I was not expecting Theo Pinson to come back in any capacity.
I think it was a surprise. Again, that's not something I'm really gonna.
No.
Like what? Listen, if they see something in Theo Pinson, he's an interesting young player. He's still young. All power to them. And yeah, I mean, that's it. I think really all eyes at this point are on Randle, and do they get another? Again, I'm not going to say point guard. I'm going to say another guy who can help run the offense in here at this point. And I don't necessarily think, because here's the thing. This is the nice thing about RJ Barrett, and I'll turn this over to you because whatever crazy conspiracy theory you have. The nice thing about RJ Barrett is RJ Barrett could play the 3. He could slide over the 3 very, 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 very easily. So if you want to give me, how would Knicks fans feel about Mitchell Robinson, Obi Toppin, RJ Barrett as your 3, 4, 5? Again, I don't want to say any name, but like a pretty good 2 who could maybe do some stuff with the ball. Like at that point, I don't really care who's running point. You want to give me Dennis Smith Jr., you want to give me Elfrid Payton. It's like you have some flexibility. You want to give me Frank Ntilikina. Although I'm not sure if, we'll see. That's it. That's all I wanted to say. And with that, I turn it over to, is it Crazy Town now? Is that where we're going?
I guess, look, this was an interesting week, obviously. And we're still trying to figure out, we're trying to make sense of a lot of what's going on. And you're obviously hearing things. I'm going off of no reports. I'm trying to look at the walls and decipher what's the reading of the walls. And what I see is, again, I see Ed Davis coming in on a deal that has not officially been consummated. I see an excess of salary cap, and I see the fact that they're signing bigs, which is exactly what Julius Randle is, and the fact that they drafted Toppin, as you touched upon. So I talked about this a little bit on Twitter, but for those who may not have seen it, those who aren't necessarily on it, those who want a more thorough explanation of where I'm coming from. Again, I keep gravitating towards this idea of Mike Conley. And again, I'm not saying it's likely by any stretch. I can understand why it's a long shot, but I'd like to at least lay out why I think it does make sense for all sides. So just to begin with, if the Knicks figured out a way to get Mike Conley's salary in and shipping Julius Randle's out, it would not be to Utah, but just bear with me, they would have $5.1 million left. Now we know that they're also potentially in conversations with JaVale McGee in terms of taking on his salary. So there's a thought of, okay, well, if we took on $4.2 million, we'd have like less than $1 million in cap space. We'd be good there. We can also figure out a way to use our room exception, and we can cut one of, Davis, McGee, figured out there. The question,
but that doesn't open up a roster spot, correct?
Well, right now they're at 14, so it would still be a push because Randle for Conley.
Yeah.
And then,
And then you're bringing in one more person.
Right, but you're cutting one of Davis and McGee. So that would be down one.
Yeah, so I guess that's my question.
You're still at 14.
So hold on, though. I don't think they. So whether if they acquire Ed Davis, I hope I'm not throwing cold water on this. If they acquire Ed Davis, right? That Ed Davis was acquired, obviously. Well, actually, it doesn't matter when he was acquired. His salary is on the books for this season. If they cut him, unless I'm really mistaken, that doesn't open up a new roster spot, does it?
Sure it does. It's dead salary. It's a roster spot. It's just the money that's committed. It's the same way in how they cut Taj Gibson, and that's $1 million on the books. That opened up a roster spot.
That's true. This is blowing my mind.
It's just 15 bodies that you need. So, the 14 is including Ed Davis because it's a presumed trade.
Okay, I'm with you. I'm sorry, I did not realize that.
That's fine. So, but again, the question here is, the Jazz are obviously not going to deal with Julius Randle. There's no reason for them to when they just signed Derek Favors using the mid-level exception. Yep. So then it's a matter of where's he going to go?
Yes.
And I also look at a team like New Orleans, and New Orleans is fascinating to me because look at the market that's out there right now. It's dead. Absolutely dead. There's no
Deader than denim
that can offer Brandon Ingram a contract that's over $27 million, which is what his max would be.
Yeah.
So if you're New Orleans, unless you're trying to play the short game here and say to Brandon Ingram, this is our offer, it's a cheap offer, take it or leave it, there's some tomfoolery going on because why wouldn't they just extend it? If they want to help build around him, there's some sort of extension that can go on.
So you're basically saying, why haven't they offered him the extension yet?
Yes. I don't quite understand, because if that's a player that you want to, we're looking at Jason Tatum, Donovan Mitchell. They're restricted free agents next year, and they've already signed extensions. Bogdanovic just signed an offer sheet with the Hawks, and that's with another team. Why is Brandon Ingram not re-upping the very moment that free agency starts? I don't think it's because the Pelicans don't want him. I think it's just because there's other things going on. So
I can't wait. I'm like waiting for my mind to be blown. This is great. Continue.
Listen, let me just put it this way. If I'm right, great. Whatever. If I'm wrong, it's fun fan fiction to pass the time because we've got so much cap space that
fan fiction's great. I love this.
All right. So if you take away Brandon Ingram's cap hold, you are running at about $101.7 million for the Pelicans. But you're not going to do that, right? You're going to give them a max. So then you're at around $128 million. And then there's some dancing they can do. Absolutely. But if they use anything more than like the taxpayer mid-level exception, which they absolutely could, they're suddenly hard capped. Being hard capped is not a problem because they're not going to hit $138 million, but they will have more than the luxury tax of $132.6 million. Why is that a problem?
If they do what? I thought you said Ingram gets them to 128 or 127.
Right. If they sign anyone for the non-taxpayer.
Oh, if they use the mid-level of at hard caps.
They're not in the taxpayer mid-level.
So it gets them to the tax. Yeah.
But so anything that's more than say like $5 million, that's going to get them into the tax bracket. So why is that important?
They have no desire to be in.
Right. And the reason they have no desire to be in is because of the fact that the Benson family also owns the Saints. And the Saints have a salary cap of about $200 million, which means that with very limited income, you are spending $340 million, because you have to pay luxury taxes too.
Yeah.
On just player salaries alone. We haven't even talked about any of the people in the front offices of either teams.
No, it's a lot of money.
Any overhead you have to deal with. It's a ton of money going out, and you don't know when money's necessarily coming in. And it's important to these teams. It's important to save money.
Yeah.
And so it's this thought process as well of, look how many point guards they have on the roster, right? They've got Brandon Ingram. What am I looking at? Well, Eric Bledsoe.
Eric Bledsoe.
Lonzo Ball. You just drafted Kira Lewis Jr. You've got.
They don't have
Alexander
George Hill
Walker.
anymore. They sent George Hill off to.
Yep.
They just traded him. They traded him somewhere.
Oklahoma City.
There you go.
Yep. But here's the other thing. Steven Adams, he just got $2 million in his bonus to move from Oklahoma City to New Orleans. So that also adds more money to the payroll that is unavoidable.
There you go.
That's a problem for them. What are they going to do? Well, let's then talk about the Jazz, because the Jazz in this case would be sending out Mike Conley. Well, they themselves are in the luxury tax by about $3 million. We're not sure how their new ownership feels about spending money. But the thing is, and this is what I wrote about for the Strickland last week, there is this possibility, probably a strong possibility, that the Jazz go into the luxury tax next year, which means that they get hit with the repeater tax if they go into the tax this year, which is bad.
So it's not just about this year, it's about next year, and the money can add up quickly. As if anybody's seen the reports of what Kelly Oubre Jr. is going to cost the Warriors, although I guess they may have a disabled player exception, but whatever. It's going to cost them a lot of money. Continue. Sorry.
Yeah. Oubre, the addition of him is going to cost in total $82 million.
Yeah. It's just the way the multipliers work. It's like, there's a reason why teams like climb over themselves to not go in the tax.
Right. Yeah. So you've got one team that's in the tax. You've got one team that could easily be in the tax and has financial woes themselves. And you've got another team that has plenty of cap space and they're trying to move parts. So if you're the Jazz, you're looking for a point guard. You need someone that you can say to Donovan Mitchell, we're building around you. This is the reason why, because we love you. We want to keep you. And obviously he resigned.
I see it now. Okay.
You see where I'm going. But right. So how can the deal work out? Well, what I've got is this. You get Conley and Davis to New York. You get some sort of, asset. Maybe it's one of the second round picks from 2023. And then what you do is you could say, well, in terms of point guard, we could trade, we being the Pelicans, we could trade Eric Bledsoe or we could trade Lonzo Ball. The thing about Lonzo Ball to Utah. The thing about Lonzo Ball is I am skeptical that the Pelicans want to pay him his next contract.
I am also skeptical that the Pelicans want to pay him in his next contract.
Right. And I think that drafting Lewis gives us an insight that he's not ready to take over by any stretch. That would be Bledsoe's job. But having Ingram on a max contract, having to pay Zion in a few years, and in between those two, or I guess technically in between those two, you've got Lonzo Ball earning a significant salary. And I think that the perfect thing for a team like Utah to say is, we've got someone that can be along Donovan Mitchell's timeline. They can grow together. They were the same draft class. It works out perfectly.
Lonzo.
And then in terms of fit, look at their point guard situation. I talked about this, I think in the article where
Lonzo and Mitchell would be wonderful together.
It really would be. It'd be a great fit for both of them. And you don't have to necessarily start Lonzo either. You can potentially bring him off the bench if you really wanted to, because the lineup of, I want to say, Donovan Mitchell, Bojan Bogdanovic, Royce O'Neal, Joe Ingles, and Rudy Gobert did really well.
They did
incredibly well last year. So you could run those five and then have Lonzo off bench. You could do a whole
I don't think they'd actually do it. I think that Lonzo,
there are opportunities. That's it. And his shots really come along. So it's not like he's this awful addition. And mind you, the Jazz were the number one team in 3-point percentage last year.
Okay. So wait, hold on. And
I've got to add one more player to the mix.
Yeah, please.
In order for salaries to start to match, you have to add, like, if you're sending Lonzo and his $11 million salary, you've got to send like 12, something around there back. And
to New Orleans.
From New Orleans to Utah. You can't just send Lonzo on his own. You've got to attach more salary with it. So here, if you're New Orleans, you're not going to
so Conley's going out.
Lonzo's 34.5.
Yes.
Lonzo's 11. You need more.
Yeah.
So here are the salaries that you can send.
Don't.
You do.
Why? Because okay. Here, what are the Pelicans getting?
Well, I'm getting.
We're not there yet.
We're not there yet.
Okay.
We're getting there. So
I sorry, I wasn't under. But if it's for you, why couldn't Utah just send out Conley and take in Lonzo?
Because we're also involving the Knicks. And
otherwise,
the Knicks have
they
to send salary out. The Knicks can't just take salary in.
Well, yes, because they have spent some money. Okay.
Right. So the other salary that you're adding, you're not sending Steven Adams because that's a gargantuan $29.5 million deal.
Yeah.
You're not sending Brandon Ingram. You can't even trade Eric Bledsoe until at least December 5th anyway, and you wouldn't trade Bledsoe and Lonzo Ball. You're not trading Zion Williamson. The only other contract that makes sense,
which got some breaking news, by the way,
is JJ Redick.
Do you want me to break the news now? Or you want me to finish?
No. Let's hold off, and then we'll crush my dreams.
Keep going. Keep going. I want you to finish. You've come so far. You've come so far.
John, I hate this. I hate everything about this.
You've come so far. No, not only are we keeping this in the podcast, we are like featuring this as its own YouTube clip. How long did that last? That lasted a solid 10 minutes at least.
I had a feeling that this was going to happen. I really did.
12 minutes maybe?
But you know what? This just makes for better drama.
It's just a freak out
on my part.
This is content creation.
It's all bullshit. All right, whatever. We'll just keep going my plan. And then we'll announce the news afterwards, and then I'll get into my own tirade. Whatever. All right. You've got JJ Redick going because of the fact this feels useless, man. All right, whatever. You got JJ Redick going into this salary because of the fact that it matches. And then the only reason you're sending Julius Randle to New Orleans is due to the fact that you need to have matching salary. And you can send, a 2021 second round pick. It doesn't have to be anything. It works. The reason it would work for all teams is because of the fact that you get 2 that avoid the luxury tax. You get 1 that doesn't have to worry at all because of cap space and can absorb a lot of this and still take in a JaVale McGee type dump. And everyone would be happy. But of course, I can't be happy because, John, would you like to say what just happened?
Before I do, hold on. Let's just the final deal that you concocted. The final deal that you concocted is Julius goes to New Orleans, right?
Sure.
Okay. Julius goes to New Orleans. JJ Redick and Lonzo Ball go to Utah.
Hypothetically.
And Mike Conley Jr. goes to the Knicks.
Along with Ed Davis. And the Pelicans, do the Pelicans get anything else? Do the Pelicans get like a draft? Pelicans probably get something from the Jazz, right? They would get a protected first round pick.
They would get a protected first round pick. And the Knicks would get like a second round pick. That's a really good deal. And you know what? I think it's something that, maybe if the Knicks had you in their front office, this is something they would have done.
This also proves, by the way, that I'm not a burner for any front office, personnel. Because clearly I would be in the know that, all right, should we just say it? Should we just, people know by now, obviously. You have to.
Well, no, Austin Rivers is a Knick. 1-year deal, as reported by Woj. They now have 15 roster spots, which means any trade. Here's the thing. They could still do your crazy deal. Just hear me out.
Okay. What? All right.
Hold on. Hear me out. Because according to you, again, they could just cut Ed Davis today.
Well, no. The only way that this would work
Oh no, that's right. They can't cut Ed Davis because Ed Davis isn't here yet. Never mind. Sorry.
Let's get a little creative. Again, the fact that they just signed Rivers would tell me that they're not looking for a lead guard. But again, let me put it this way.
I don't know that I necessarily say that.
Well, if it's not, then you have to ask yourself, who of, say, Frank or Dennis Smith Jr. is getting the boot?
So what if it's neither? What if hold on. Because now it comes down to the money, right? Because Frank and Dennis Smith Jr. both make a decent sum of money, right?
Right.
Actually, JJ Redick and Lonzo Ball together make how much money?
$24 million.
$24 million. They make $24 million.
Mm-hmm.
Julius Randle and Frank Ntilikina would make together about the same amount of money. So you're not really saving the Pelicans
That's
a lot of cash.
Unless, you feature Melly or Jackson Hayes, although I'm skeptical that they would trade Jackson Hayes. Why are they drafting? Why
are they giving up Jackson Hayes?
Right.
And they already traded away Darius Miller in the giant Steven Adams deal. They don't really have any other salary that's like easily.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
But they could potentially do something like if they didn't trade Lonzo Ball, they could wait to trade Eric Bledsoe until December 5th, which is when everything expires. And if you did Eric Bledsoe and JJ Redick, then Utah is still saving money. They're going below the tax. They get a point guard who can win now around a player like Donovan Mitchell. And then in that case, you could have Lonzo Ball being able to spend. I love how we can just we know that this dream is dead, but we can try to revive it as much as we can. Some sort of ER doctor performing surgery.
I'll be honest with you. I did not think that they were ever really in the market for Connolly.
Even I said it's a long shot. I get it completely. And this makes it an even longer shot.
Because he makes a lot of money and he's not really a trade. He wasn't going to be a tradable asset. We're probably going to have to give up a little something. Like you said, maybe they give up a little something to make this happen. Where I thought you were going for a minute was Lonzo to the Knicks, which now this would seem to, because Austin Rivers is kind of like the poor man's Lonzo Ball. Obviously he's not the playmaker that Lonzo Ball is, but in terms of a guy that can he run a little bit of point for you in a jam? Yeah, but really he should be a 2, and it's not great because the shot comes and goes that. He's in that sense. And he's good on defense. We can just throw this whole fucking podcast right in the garbage.
No, this has to live. I worked too hard on this.
The whole fucking podcast is thrown in the fucking trash. I really want to go poll everybody on Twitter who was up in fucking arms about I'm leaving my rant in, that's for shit sure. Who was up in arms about Elfrid Payton. Again, they got another ball handler. Is he a point guard? Not really technically, but again, the whole. You want to talk about development? Let's close the show by talking about development. Everybody throws around development. Yeah, this. Okay, what is development this year? What does it look like? It's putting the ball in RJ Barrett's hands, and seeing what the fuck he could do with it. Everybody forgets last season. Part of the reason why they sucked ass for the first however many games of that Coach Fizdale was in charge is because he essentially treated RJ Barrett like a secondary ball handler. He treated Julius Randle like a primary. I can't say that was a straight face, but it was a real thing that happened. And he treated RJ Barrett like a secondary ball handler. His assists were significant. His usage was way up there. And then Mike Miller took over, and everybody was scared for their jobs, and they took that responsibility away. RJ Barrett, for whatever value he's ever going to have in the league, it's going to have to be some way, shape, or form as a playmaker. He's going to have the ball in his hands. So then you get to the next step of all right, how can we do that such that it doesn't run into the problem that I brought up before, which is that when you put the ball in the hands of someone who the rest of the guys on the floor don't believe can run a sufficient NBA offense, they're just going to be despondent over that. Well, it's great when you could have other ball handlers on the court at the same time who can handle the ball, again, not running offense, not talking about running offense, but you're not leaving it all on that one guy. And Austin Rivers, to me, is a great compliment to RJ Barrett in that sense. Do I feel comfortable running lineups out there of Rivers, Barrett. Let's talk about this. Rivers, Barrett. They got the aforementioned Alec Burks now. Obi Toppin and Mitchell Robinson. 5 minutes, 10 minutes a game. That wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, right?
Not the worst thing.
I could get behind it. It's just, I think this gives them some nice options, and I think Rivers is he's a good culture guy. He's a good locker room guy. 1 year deal. Another guy who you're talking about. I don't know what the money is yet, but let's see if we have updated reporting. Mark Berman. God love Mark Berman. The Knicks got a point guard from Houston, and it's not Russell Westbrook. God love him.
I love also how there was always this understanding or this thought process of trading Carmelo Anthony to the Clippers and getting Austin Rivers back, or this idea of trading Carmelo Anthony to the Blazers and getting Mo Harkless back, and both will be a Knick.
Yeah, this is crazy. Listen, I'm really happy about this, and I hope that this will calm folks down about the Knicks offseason. Because again, if you would have told me a week ago that we'd be sitting here and we'd have Elfrid Payton on 1 year and Austin Rivers on 1 year, I'm sorry, I'll take that combo over Jeff Teague or DJ Augustine. I'd rather spread the wealth. There's one other thing that I'm debating whether or not we should bring up. We've been talking for an hour and 15 minutes. It's the end of the podcast. Let's do it. And I say this as someone who, I'm not saying this out of nowhere. I wonder what this says about Frank Ntilikina's future with the team.
I was kind of thinking that too a little bit around with the Burks signing. Not that I felt like it was significant enough to push him out, but between Burks, Bullock, clearly with Payton and with Rivers, and still having Dennis Smith Jr. on the roster,
who they apparently want to, give it a go
for better or for worse. To whoever's the one,
better or worse, that to us part.
That. Right. There's clearly not an opening at the point, and you have other options available to you on the wings. And I think if you're the Knicks, what you're probably looking at is Frank Ntilikina can give us value. But we also know that in a year, he's going to have a really high cap hold. And you can reduce the cap hold. Obviously, you can sign him to a contract. You could just say goodbye and wipe that away. But I'm starting to wonder if there is a path for him on this team long term. I mean, thought about this beforehand, obviously, but just more of a narrowing of that gap. And if it means that there is a team that might be interested in him, that might use him, or how you're going to go about that, I'm really not sure now. But I do agree. I think that the idea of him being on this team long term is probably a lot less as of right now than it was, say, 15 minutes ago.
Well, at
least to public knowledge.
We're going to close it out with this rotation. Tibbs, say one thing for Tibbs. He runs a pretty tight 10-man unit. He's not someone that really likes to fuck around. He likes to be steady and stable and kind of have that thing. So I'm not even thinking about positions right now. I'm just thinking about guys that are going to play for sure. So we got Mitchell Robinson, we got Noel, we got Toppin. I'm going to put Randle to the side for right now. I'm going to do what a lot of Knicks fans would like to do and just kind of move Julius Randle over to the side. We got Obi Toppin. Everything I've heard, literally everything I've heard. And again, maybe the reason I've heard is because they want people to believe it and to build up this allure. But everything I've heard is that they don't want to give up on Kevin Knox, and they're in on Kevin Knox, and they believe in him. And I might not believe it if it wasn't for the fact that they just hired Kenny Payne. So I'm putting in Knox as a guy who's going to play some minutes.
Yeah, that's fair.
This year. So that's 4. So you got RJ Barrett. You got the aforementioned Rivers, who, I mean, you could tell me Austin Rivers is going to lead them in minutes this year, and I wouldn't be surprised. That he's good. He's just a good basketball player, and you want him on the floor. RJ Barrett, Rivers, Payton. He's going to play. 1, 2, 3, 4. So Mitch, Noel, Toppin, Knox, RJ, Rivers, Payton. They got Bullock still. If he's here and he's healthy, he's going to play, right? Who am I forgetting? DSJ is, so there's DSJ, which is not an automatic, right?
Did you say Brazdeikis?
Oh my God. You know who I didn't say I'm not saying Brazdeikis because that's not an automatic. I can't believe I'm forgetting, what's his face? Burks. So Burks, DSJ. That to me, that's the 10. Mitch, Noel, Toppin, Knox, RJ, Rivers, Payton, Bullock, Burks, DSJ. If I had to guess right now what 10 men were up on their big board, I would guess those 10, which then leaves the question of, all right, what the hell do you do with Randle? I don't know. I can't say for sure whether they have a deal lined up. I certainly have not heard as much. I know that he's been talked about. I don't know. Where is the Randle and Frank for, where is that? I'm not sure. Man, Charlotte's interesting to me. They just got that Batum. They have to, now there's conflicting reports.
They just signed Bismack Biyombo, though.
Okay, fine. But they have the Batum salary, which again was originally reported was going to be stretched, and now there's some backtracking on that with the thinking that maybe they're trying to work out a sign and trade or whatever the case may be with Boston. Can they dump Batum salary? Like they only need to save $7 million, right? Well, but assuming Biyombo gets the minimum, which I'm assuming he did. So Batum and like filler, like they must have a small salary somewhere in there for Randle.
This was a much more realistic, I thought, suggestion than the Conley one, in terms of the Knicks being able to get in on the sign and trade for Gordon Hayward. And I believe what I had was Batum and Monk and the Hornets, first round pick.
Yeah.
And then Randle going to Boston and then Boston trading Gordon Hayward. And the reason why, if you're the Celtics, you do this is, one, you could get nothing, and that's not really going to help you. You should get something out of it. It's the same reason why they let Terry Rozier walk and why they took on Kemba Walker. And in that sign and trade last year between the same two teams. But the other thing is that if you take on Randle, sure, you just had Tristan Thompson, so you're less likely as of right now than when I certainly hypothesize that as an option. But you also get a TPE. You get a significant trade player exception.
You do.
And you could get a player for, if we're just trying to do the math quickly, it could be at least 13 million, 16 million. It depends in terms of how much is going out. So
I'd have to look a little bit. If Hayward's signing for 30 and Randle's making 19, right? 19 next year. You're looking at 18.9. You're looking at around $11 million. Right. It's not nothing. There's a deal there to be had. There's got to be a deal there to be had. I'm not saying listen, anybody, I don't know if we get aggregated, but anybody listening to this, I'm not like sitting here saying like Randle's going to be off the team, but it would, at this point, I feel comfortable saying that it would surprise me if he was here. The writing is on the wall.
It just has to be. The moves that they're making are a clear indication that the biggest salary possible is going to get moved in some capacity.
What else do we got? The Pacers are trading TJ Leaf and a future second round pick to OKC for somebody. I can't pronounce that name. All right, nothing else on the Knicks. I think it's safe to go. Let's hope this podcast is still relevant tomorrow. It's good listening, right? I yelled at people.
Sure.
Who doesn't love to hear the podcast that they put on when the host yells at them? That's great.
Or the fact that you got to see me or hear me pour my heart out and then watch it get stomped on mid, scenario. It's just great. This is art. This is it's great.
It's just great. It's great podcasting.
Again, I'll close out saying this. I managed to pull up the presentation from last week, and because I know that fans might be down on Payton still. We haven't seen Twitter yet. Maybe it's on fire. Maybe people are cool with it.
Totally. I mean, if you go by my tweet, I quote tweeted Woj and I said, love it. That was all. I just love it. And I got 234 likes and 47 responses. And just glancing, we have I hate this fucking planet. That's pretty good. But I think he's joking around. Most of them are just like questions and people like saying that they like it actually. So it does not look like Twitter is on fire.
That's great. Yeah. So again, we had 6 goals last time. The first was
close us out, Jeremy. Bring us home with the 6 goals.
Absolutely. Add youth. We did that. Surround Mitch and RJ with ball handling, floor spacers, and smart defenders. So far, it looks like we did that. Save for maybe one player, we did that. No immovable contracts. Gordon Hayward was signed for 4 years, $120 million. We didn't do that. What we did was we avoided that immovable contract. Maybe it could have been immovable eventually. Doesn't matter.
Yeah,
we did that. Foster competitive environment. I don't know what's more competitive than a team that is basically full of people in their 20s trying to carve out roles for themselves.
Can we actually,
and the fact that at the 5 now you have Mitch not having to lose time to Taj Gibson, but instead you've got Nerlens Noel breathing down his neck.
Can we just talk about that for 2 seconds? Put aside Dennis Smith Jr. for a second, who may not be an NBA player anymore. He certainly didn't look like one last year. Put him aside for 1 sec. Alec Burks is an NBA player. He's like you want him as like your 6th or 8th man, or sorry, 7th or 8th man. Reggie Bullock, same deal. You want him as like your 7th or 8th man. Elfrid Payton, you want him as like your 7th or 8th man. But these are NBA players. Like they could play on pretty much any team in the league. Austin Rivers, let's go 6th man, right? 5th, 6th, like that. RJ Barrett, we hope he looks like a starting NBA player next year. Mitchell Robinson, starting NBA player next year. I'm going to go out on a limb and say Obi Toppin's going to look like a starting NBA player next year.
I think the fact that he is 22 years old, you're looking at a player who should be popping. And I didn't mean that as, pop and top and as a pun, but I guess it's kind of
works. Pop and top.
Right. Like he's the type of player that you want to hit the ground running. There's no reason why he should not be the rookie of the year front runner. And that means something to people. And that means something to teams. And we didn't talk about the draft because I know you tackled that with Prez, but I didn't love the Toppin pick, but I knew that, the way I went into it was for Halliburton and for Toppin, those are the 2 guys I didn't really want. I knew that I could rationalize Toppin, but not Halliburton. And the reason for Toppin is because he is your perfect trade candidate.
Yeah.
And again, I know people are thinking like, we just got him. Why are you thinking about trading him? Look, these are assets. They're players. They mean a lot to us emotionally, but everyone is an asset. It's cold-hearted. Absolutely. It feels like you're running Bain Capital or something in terms of figuring out these players, but you have to look at what your next step is to getting to the top. And every step, if you're not a step away from the top, then you have to figure out how to get to the next step. These players on easy contracts, as they excel and around players that are good, is how you're able to up their trade value.
Yeah.
So it works. It works.
And Noel, again, a guy who's 6th man. So did I mention? I think I mentioned everybody. And I didn't even talk about Randle and Emmanuel Quickly. Who knows what Emmanuel Quickly is?
Yeah, I liked him.
I like the pick maybe a little early, but whatever. They got their guy. It's what everybody's been saying for months. In this draft, you want your guy, get your guy. Yep. So they have surrounded their top 3 pieces, their 3 most important pieces, maybe Dennis Smith Jr., whatever, over to the side. They've surrounded them with competent NBA players, not great NBA players, decent NBA players who know what they're doing. They know their role. Just makes eminently more sense than what they did last offseason. And I, for one, stand by my rant to start the show.
And then you've got to acquire more future assets than we're sending out.
Yes, to finish up the 6 things, yes.
3 second-round picks in 2023 alone coming our way. We don't know what else is in store for this season. This offseason, rather. We don't know what players are getting traded next, midway through the season, because it's very easy to see with all these other teams around them improving, especially in the lottery, that if shit hits the fan for the Knicks, we'll just trade Alec Burks. We'll trade Reggie Bullock. We'll trade Austin Rivers. We'll trade Nerlens Noel. We have the flexibility to do this. And then if we need to move up for a player that we really want, if we're maybe a touch outside of that, that's an opportunity that we could do. And I'm going to say this before I say my last point. We talked about the fact that if the Knicks were able to trade with other teams that are in the West, it can impact the Mavs. I understand you are obviously still not on the
bandwagon. You know what, though? Can I just?
Yes, you can in a moment. Let me just finish.
Yeah.
Where we can be in an opportunity where that trade doesn't have to be, don't trade that whatsoever. But if you start retooling other teams in the West to the point where they're not trading first round picks, obviously, but they're getting better, and you're building everyone around the Mavericks to get better, except for the Mavericks themselves, which then could matter in the long run, because if it pushes the Mavs down a few spots, it could determine a home court advantage in a play-in game. It could maybe even factor in the fact that they have to play in a play-in game, or, whatever it might be. So that's the fifth one. And finally, flexibility in 2021, keen focus on 2022. I don't know about this one. All I know is that Randle going away makes sense this year. It makes sense next year from a $4 million guarantee standpoint.
If you could stretch the $4 million to...
No, don't stretch it. Again,
well, you can if you need to.
Of course you can, but you've already got Noah's on the book, so it's not optimal right now. It's just, if you can find a trade for Randle that works, conveniently enough, you also get $4 million off the books for next year. The question then is, who are you signing to use that money? Obviously, we don't know this, but this might sound silly. All I'll say, and I'll wrap with this, and if it's a hot take, I'm not trying for it to be truly.
Listen, man, you've earned it.
All right, but here's my feeling. The reason why Anthony Davis has not re-signed with the Lakers is not just because he's looking at what the Lakers are doing. He's also looking at what other teams are doing and how they're affecting their cap space. And then if you're the Knicks, you're not banking on him leaving LeBron James, especially not a year before LeBron James enters his last year of his contract. But what you're doing is you're saying, this is what we're doing to build around our guys. We're leaving space open. We know there's a good market. There's obviously a room here for you. We know that Obi Toppin plays your position. We can also trade him because of how he impacts other people. Anthony, this is what we're able to do. Clutch. We're signing a couple of your guys. We've got Mitch here. We can pay him. First, we can pay Anthony Davis, your other client. We're figuring things out. Again, I don't see Anthony Davis being like, oh, wow, okay, I'm just going to waltz on over to the Knicks. No, you don't leave the reigning champion, at least unless you're maybe Kevin Durant, and even then he didn't do that, to go to the Knicks. But the point here is he's just monitoring. We know he's going to sign in LA for at least a year. It could even be 2. But the fact is he's looking. He's paying attention, and that's important. And honestly, like, no one can tell me otherwise. He's got his eyes everywhere. If you see the fact that they're trading picks, he knows what the future holds. He knows they have to bring another star in. You just have to be cognizant of that. That's all.
I would love to be able to sit here and talk about Anthony Davis as a realistic thing at some point. All I will say at this point right now is that they are, and again, I'm not saying this is going to be easy. The Knicks are a competent 25 win season. How many? 72 games. So that would mean that they went 25 and 47. Okay. They're a competent looking 25, 24 win season away from walking into next summer in a really interesting position with what is going to be a top, barring something fucking nuts, a top 8 pick in a draft where, again, lots of shit could change. Nas Little went into last year's draft as a clear top 4 guy, ended up getting drafted like 30th. Shit happens. But there seems to be a pretty strong feeling that there's like 7 or 8 guys here that are real guys. So they're going to go into next. Again, they need to be competent. They need to make Obi Toppin and RJ Barrett and Mitchell Robinson. He's got to make these guys look good. Kevin Knox would be nice. But they're one season away from going into next season, make things off season very interesting. And regarding the Dallas pick, and I hope your ears are ringing somewhere out there. I have to say this. I am willing at this point to say, with the moves that Portland has made, with the moves that Phoenix has made, and Golden State, I think think Golden State will still be okay because Steph Curry's that good. And I think they maybe got another something in them. Like LA, Denver, Utah, Portland, Phoenix. I mean, who the hell knows with Houston? Golden State, like.
You see the vision.
7 seed, 6 seed, 7 seed. That's as much as I can. What?
You think it's that high?
That's as much as I could go right now. That's all I'm comfortable, because I still think the kid's going to go into next season as the MVP frontrunner.
Sure.
Which I think, if again, history says if you have that guy on your team, you're going to win however many games. So, but that a 7 seeder in the West is the especially with the way the East is shaping up. Shit. I mean, that's the 16th pick in the draft next year. 16, 17,
something around there. And if they make it to a play-in game, anything goes. Anything could happen. And then you're looking at a team, this could really go for any of them. It doesn't even have to go for the Mavs. You could look at a team that's in the 7th seed that loses to the 8th seed and then has to play the winner of the 9 and 10. And if they lose 2 games, they're out. They went from the 7th seed, which in a normal year would be guaranteed playoffs.
We're getting nuts here.
But that's just the way it is now.
Here's how I'm closing this podcast out. Actually, no, I can't close. I'm going to close that podcast. One more thing, but we've got 90 minutes and I haven't mentioned our sponsor. I think they're still our sponsor. I don't know if their ad run may have actually run out yesterday, and I may be giving them free advertising, but fuck it. MyBookie. You've been hearing me talk about them for God knows how long. That's because they're awesome. It's clear that 2020 has been a year unlike any other. Yeah, the Knicks re-signed Elfrid Payton. This is why you need a sportsbook that with offers unlike any other. Get some skin in the game with MyBookie. Thanksgiving is 3 days away. I don't even know who's playing, but I know that I am going to want to put money on that so I don't have to sit and try to make conversation with the people that are in my house. I'm going to do that with MyBookie, obviously. Who else would I do it with? There's no shortage of value to be found in thousands of game lines, unique prop bets, and contests that they offer every week. Full-fledged casino platform, and they don't kick you out even when you've had one too many drinks, lamenting the Knicks offseason unnecessarily. You could still go on MyBookie and play some wagers. Best of all, use the promo code OVERTIME, OVERTIME, to get your deposit matched halfway up to $1,000. So if you put in $200, they'll give you a free $100. It's winning season at MyBookie, so come join in on all the fun and win some cash while you're at it. The last thing I'm going to say, Jeremy, thank you for doing this for every week. You come back, you ask for more for reasons I couldn't possibly fathom, but you do.
Well, again, as you've said, this is our pod. Like, I can't go anywhere.
It's our pod.
We are the Siamese twins that I talked about. Oh God!
I thought you were going to make a sex joke with that before, but
you are the Elfrid Payton to my Julius Randle, John.
Oh God. Here's the last thing I'm going to say. If they somehow finagle a way to get a future first round pick out of Charlotte and take on Nicholas Batum by the time this offseason is over, I can officially say it. This will be the greatest Knicks offseason of my lifetime. And I don't think it's particularly close. So there. That's what I'm going to say. All right. This has been fun. Thank you, everybody. Anything you want to say before we get out of here?
Let's just be patient a little bit more. I mean, we didn't see this Rivers signing coming into play.
They're not done yet.
They're not done. We got a little bit more time. That's why I said earlier, it just feels incomplete. We don't have the full story yet, and it'll be something to monitor because sure, there's Cade Cunningham, but as you said, a lot of great prospects out there too. So,
you know what's better than watching a whole season looking forward to Cade Cunningham is watching a whole season where the basketball isn't absolutely atrocious. Yeah. Looking forward to Cade Cunningham. And I think with this roster, they will avoid absolutely atrocious basketball. I don't know how high above absolutely atrocious they'll get, but
we're watching the foundation being built, and it's not the best, or it's not, players who are old enough to really get to that point where they're elevating their games, but we can see it, and it's fun, and the losing will suck, but it's a short season, so we can suck it up. But again, we'll see what other pieces are coming in, and we'll go from there. And also for those of you who are watching, you've probably noticed my feeble attempt at growing a mustache this month. I am doing Movember. If you have the opportunity to donate to a good cause, I'm donating for prostate cancer. certainly recommend it. So I'm going to leave it with that, and we'll see how the rest of the offseason shakes out. I'm sure we will be right back at this a week from now.
Sounds good, man. This was a blast. Everybody, thank you for listening to the Knicks Film School Podcast, another episode of the Knicks Film School Podcast. Sorry I yelled, but I love you all. You're all my family. You know that. And we'll talk to you again next week.